Good evening, guys. Welcome back to my channel. We've got a special guest on here tonight and a little bit of a role reversal for myself, but I look forward to this for a while. James Ogden, the Baltimore Ravens draft guide, redstarbaltimore.com. I got the address right,
You do?
correct, right, James? First of all, welcome, to my channel. I think it's the first time that you and I have done something like this. I'm really grateful for you to make the time because I understand there's a differential or a lag time, between what time it actually is between me and you. So welcome.
Thanks, Coach. And I feel like we have mutual appreciation of each other's work for a few years now. So excited to do this with you too.
I already did, but I will tell you the website, the amount of work that myself and a bunch of other people did for our website, draftsignal.pro, I now have 10 times the amount of appreciation for what I see here. And I'll have the draft guide up. James, you released it today, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll have that up and we'll certainly refer to it and show people. I'm sure that most Ravens fans have already accessed it. I know the people in my Discord have been talking about it pretty much all day since you dropped it. But my own level of appreciation now is drastically different because I'm like, how do you do this by yourself for real? That wasn't my list of questions, but how?
It's funny. Over the years, I've had a couple of people help a bit, but I think I realize when people help that I get to a point where I'm like, this is quite a lot of work. But it's a labor of love, right? Like it's just it's the thing that sustains me in lots of ways. Like going in and watching film on college players is totally ridiculous, but I found the thing that I love doing in my life, and I'm quite happy to sink every bit of spare time I have into it. And I'm limited for spare time now with children, as we've talked about before. Yeah. And but every bit of spare time I have, I spend on it, and just love doing it. Like it's a thing. And the thing I think that helps, because mine is very long form, and I think the thing that helps is not only do I enjoy watching prospects and learning about the game and then applying that to my evaluations, I also like writing, and so that kind of helps as well. Yeah.
Well, I think any serious endeavor, is challenge. We want it to be challenging, right? And I can tell that this is by the way you talk about it. And again, I really realize it when I scroll through. I think it was 2 years ago was one of the first times that I ever had like a couple of hours to actually scroll through it. Our third child, my wife and I's third child, was born early May, so the draft had already occurred. And I had the draft guide, and so I was looking at some of the players that we had picked and looking at basically your evaluations of them, and there was a lot of them there. So I have a newfound appreciation of it, based on the work that we did. I am interested in this, and this is, I sent you a bunch of questions. I have my own process for evaluating a prospect, but I don't get to near the level of players that many other evaluators do. Probably because mine is slow. I'll tell you mine first, and then I want to know what yours is. I watch 2 games that have high production, but not against like Norfolk State or, someone like that. I watch 2 games of high production against a quality opponent. Let's do it that way. And then the third game I watch normally is the best team that they faced from that specific year. So that's definitely where I start. And then the fourth one is usually like late season games, conference championship games, or FBS playoffs. So like, do you have a set procedure or does it differ depending on position or maybe the player?
So in terms of that, I think I will always look very similarly to you for maybe 1 or 2 high production games, 1 or 2 low production games. I also, while I don't put a lot of stock in them, and they won't color my opinion either way, but I will look at PFF just at grades and just like might pick out a low grade game and a high grade game just to see. But that doesn't play into the evaluation for me. But I do that. And I think I will always, but the place I always go to, and the place I went to in this draft a lot more actually, is competition. And it's why I'm a bit higher and lower on a couple of guys actually than the consensus, is just trying to find some elite competition that they played. And so that's definitely something that I'll look at early on. But I mentioned before we started, like one of the things I end up doing quite a lot at the moment is um, just chasing the feeling of. I studied a few years ago at the Scouting Academy under Dan Hatman, who's a former NFL scout, and um, I always have Dan in my head when I think a player is inconsistent. I always hear Dan in my head saying, okay, why is he inconsistent? You can't just say he's inconsistent. What is it that he's inconsistent? Like, is it game situation? Is it down and distance? Is it level of competition? Is it because it's raining? Like, why is he the guy inconsistent? And the problem I have now is that I think you probably can watch 3 to 5 games on a player and get a good idea of who that player is. The problem is I now chase that feeling of understanding a player to as much as I can. And so there are times when I end up on 10 plus games on a guy because I've just kept watching a guy because I didn't quite understand who he was in a certain facet of the game. And I just end up keep watching and watching and watching until I can find out.
You really, listening to you answer that question and describe your process, it reminds me of some people I know, myself included, when we were coaching. And it was, I will never forget a friend who I was coaching with on the staff one year. He was like, dude, we're gonna destroy this team. We're gonna destroy them. Like, why are you here watching the 6th game or whatever it was? I don't even remember. But I said a couple of things. I was like, the kids can't come in on Monday and see a game plan that's 3 pages long when last week's game plan was 14 pages long. They can't see that because they'll dial it down. And so, but it's also, I think, independent of that, what you're describing, I can connect with because you're describing an inability to turn it off. That's what
Yeah.
you're literally saying. You can't turn it off. That's what I'm hearing, at least. And that's a good problem. I think it means you found something that you really enjoy.
And the other thing, right, that I think I wrote in the introduction to the guide this year is like, I these kids are putting their life into this. Like, I take really seriously that I put out written content about their abilities on the field. Like, I don't take that lightly at all. I have the utmost respect for these kids that even the ones that I'm not as high on as other people.
Right.
Like, and so I can't tell. I'm really low on David Bailey compared to the consensus, and he was one of the first guys I did, and I came out of it thinking, "Oh, I think I really like this kid. Like, I think I'm going to be higher than the consensus." And then I looked at the consensus and was like, "Whoa, I'm low on this kid." I can't
Right.
tell you how much David Bailey tape I watched because I was determined to not be wrong. I still think I probably am going to be wrong on
It's a good
David Bailey,
thing.
but you've got to respect that the grind from those kids and put in equal effort, I think.
You're attempting to disprove your own initial evaluation or strengthen it. Either
Yeah.
one. Your attempt, and I agree with that. Look, I will tell you, I know a number of college coach. I know a number of guys that I actually coached who are now coaching in college, and they're they would have tremendous respect for your process or like Jason from Huddle It Up Films or people who watch so many games. Because look, I will be honest with you. In private, those guys have told me when we look at a recruit, I know after 30 seconds. I'm talking about like Division I schools. They know after 30 seconds whether the recruit film they're looking at could possibly play for them. Now, there's a difference there. You're talking about the high school to college progression, and
Yeah.
what we're doing here is, or what you're doing is high level, elite NCAA college football, and then trying to progress to the NFL and being one of the 225 players drafted or whatever. So the depth, excuse me, and the intentional attempt to get to depth is obvious. It's obvious. So has there ever been a player where you went one way and then reversed field?
It's
Maybe.
funny. In this class, it's funny, you're on the guy actually that I've been on a real journey with in Carnell Tate, who when I did in summer scouting last year, I think I self scout myself quite a lot, and I know that at the receiver position, I have at times overrated um, technique, technical ability, separating with processing. Like posture, like the small details in route running that I think are really important. I do have a tendency to misplace athleticism at the position. And so with Carnell Tate, I loved the attention to detail in the way he runs routes and the way he separates. Like I thought he was just an expert technician. But I missed early on his athletic ability because as much as his measurable speed is not like it's not elite.
Right.
I do think his play speed is, and I think I missed in summer scouting the fact that I felt like he was too speed deficient to really separate well at the NFL. And
At a certain time, you mean? At a certain time, you felt, okay, got it.
That's how I felt. I now don't feel that way at all, and I've watched easily enough film to have would have been able to pick out several examples where I can show you his play speed being very good, like
it's
at least very good.
That's a genuine search for the best possible evaluation that you can provide, and that's genuine is the word that I would use. Look, he was coached by Brian Hartline, who's now left Ohio State, so the proof is in the pudding for what Hartline has been able to produce. I know that Marvin Harrison Jr. Has obviously didn't live up to expectations, but he's got a long career ahead of him. So really cool to hear that. First of all, I should have asked this in the beginning. How many years have you done this?
So I've done this. I think I have now been evaluating prospects for about 20 years. The guide this is the fourth guide I think I've released publicly. I started writing a guide about 10 years ago and never made it publicly available. I just did it for myself. Mainly a confidence issue, probably more than anything. And I do have as a Brit, I do have a bit of an imposter syndrome sometimes in an American dominated sport, American dominated content. So I think I kind of just left it for myself for a long time, but I've been doing it. I've been looking at evaluating plays for a very long time. And, it goes back to I played in college over here, and that's not, college over here is nothing to write home about comparatively to the US. But the team I played for over here were reasonably forward thinking in terms of UK American football, because we ran a spread, and at the time back in the early 2000s it was based very heavily. Our head coach had a bit of a relationship with Mike Leach, and it was based quite heavily on Texas Tech, Mizzou offenses at the time. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time I watched all 22 film, and first time that I got into college film, watching Texas Tech, Mizzou film, and
Mike Leach.
Yeah, and just got hooked really. And then discovered the draft at that time, and then just started watching prospects in college, and it was so much fun.
It's like probably a poor comparison or analogy at first. It's like maybe not listening to music for your first 14, 15 years of your life, and then you're exposed to like Eric Clapton or Jimi Hendrix on guitar. It's like so that's really cool, because Mike Leach is obviously very, very unique. The reason I ask about the number of years is because, of course, Ravens fans or some Ravens fans are going to watch this. My draft content on YouTube has been really low performing, but I do have a significant number of Lions and Seahawks fans that watch videos on my channel, and so they may not know much about this at all, right? They're going to be exposed to Lions and Seahawks stuff, but I think this still applies. I know that this is Raven centric for you, but the depth to which this is, I should have said this in the initial couple of minutes. Other fans of other teams, I have no doubt, are consuming this as well. And you probably get feedback and or communication from them, at various times.
Yeah, I think so. And the evaluation itself stands really, if I do, specifically in the projection, in the goal box of the projection and the Ravens fit, like that is talking specifically about the Ravens. But I am trying to evaluate the prospect with fidelity to a process that would work across in the rest of it, on the purple side. So yeah, I would, it would be amazing if other teams fans do read it. But yeah,
Well, they
it
will.
will hold up, I think, in that sense.
They will. I mean, I'll make sure my Lions Discord has, I think, 48 people, and my Seahawks Discord has like 18. So I mean, I'll directly share it in there to ensure that at least that audience gets exposed to it. How has there been a time? Well, you said 4 years for public consumption. Has there been a year where you shifted or changed the product for any reason, either the presentation or what you did, either graphically or from a research standpoint?
So I think the presentation shifted a couple of years ago. I just wanted it to look a bit better, and so I spent a bit more time making it look a bit better. This is the third year in a row I published, but I missed the year after the first year. And the reason I missed a year after the first year was after the first year, I wanted to spend a lot more time thinking more carefully about my grading. And so one of the things you don't get exposed to in the guide is the detailed grading that I do. So the performance and potential grade is something that I built in that year off, where I grade across, for each player, I grade across 11 factors. 6 of them are generic to any position, and then 5 of them are position specific. And the 5 position specific factors, I give 2 grades. I give 1 grade of where I think the player is now, and then a second grade of where I think the player could get to based on what I've seen on film and what I know about player development. And so that then spits out a performance and potential grade. And it was what I really wanted to do was capture the fact that I think every player has a range of outcomes, and you need to. I wanted to be more. I wanted to codify more what it meant to be a high ceiling player. And the best example of this is from last year, where my performance and potential grade for Malachi Starks and Nick Imanwori was sort of exactly how I think it played out in reality, which is that you had a player who I think at the time when you graded Imanwori would struggle with playing. Imanwori's a difficult one though, because I feel like I evaluated Imanwori for a more traditional safety position, and I shouldn't have done it. Should have been evaluating him as a nickel defender, which would have given him a different score probably. But that type of dichotomy, I think, between a player who is much closer to his ceiling versus one who is further away, I wanted to be able to show that in a numeric
smart
way.
To not have. And again, there's a depth factor here to what you're providing, which is it's not just 1 grade. It's not just a grade. There's actually 2, and you're emphasizing directly for people the difference between a Starks and an Imanwori. I think it's understood, especially for Ravens fans, that one guy was in college playing closer to his ceiling. The reality is, look at the coaching that Starks received at Georgia versus Imanwori. I feel comfortable saying this. I've seen 2 years in a row bad stances at South Carolina, oftentimes really poor alignment and late movement that puts guys out of position. And so compare that for Imanwori, I'm talking about, with what he received in Seattle, the elite of the elite coaching and preparation. So, I'm not surprised. I don't say I'm not surprised. I think looking back, it makes sense. My evaluation of Imanwori last year was not tremendously high either as a boundary side safety, considering some of those things. So that's a great answer, and it's a great facet of what's offered there, the performance grade and the potential grade. Commend you for that. Where'd you get that idea from?
Honestly, it's my wife is a HR practitioner of human resources, and she is particularly into kind of talent management, and we talked about it a lot. And there's like performance and potential is the thing that you'll map in a corporate environment, right? Of who is where, and in terms of like moving on to the next role or needing some performance management type thing. So it actually came from that, really, an understanding that that's a good way to sort of show this, and that we could map these players in that sense.
That's first of all, that reminds me of like what I've heard from teachers in the actual teaching profession or coaches who say a lot of the best teachers, best coaches are really good thieves. They take things from this person, take things from that person. So, that's first of all, I think that's amazing. Second of all, to get your wife incorporated with any element of it, is really cool. Let's be a little specific about this draft. All right,
Yeah.
can you give me um, three prospects that you really like in this draft? And I don't mean, will they be there at 14 or even 45? Preferably, I'd like to hear one or two at 14 and one or two at 45, if you know what I mean. But
Yeah.
three guys you really like as a prospect, and then maybe a brief like why. I'm talking about independent of availability, right? I'll tell you a couple of mine: D'Angelo Pons, Christian Miller, Traydon Stukes, Jay Sean Barham, who's another Maryland guy. So I got a bunch. So give me like three, maybe four if you want.
Yeah, no, cool. I did struggle. You asked me for three pre us doing this, and I did struggle to come up with three. But there's going to be a few. I'll talk about a couple. The one I would love to talk about, who I'm not going to talk about because it doesn't work for the Ravens. But on the top of my board by a considerable distance is Arvel Reese, and there is no way that you could make it work for Baltimore. It's just not going to happen.
Any
But
idea what page? Sorry, I should have had this
I
prepped.
don't know. It's coming reasonably soon. You probably you have to get through D-line first, and then he'll be first on the edge list.
My
So it'll be
apologies for
next.
people who are watching me scroll. My apologies. Go ahead, James. Sorry.
No, it's cool. I won't talk about him too much because it's just not going to happen for the Ravens. There's no way they can make this work. Even from a perspective of even moving up, maybe there'd be a conversation if he dropped to say 4 or 5, and you think about whether you give up future assets for him. But the kid is special. I would carve a role for. It's difficult because he said he wants to be a full-time edge player, but I would carve a role for him in the Ravens defense that has him in a sort of positionless type role in the same way they have with Hamilton, except you would have Reese on the line of scrimmage more than Hamilton, obviously, and Hamilton in the backfield more than Reese, but they both play in space at times for me. And I'd get Reese off the edge as well. I think he's spectacular. I think he's an amazing run defender. I think he's got enough in coverage that you could play him in space. And I think there's so much to see from him in terms of pass rush potential. And I recently saw an interview from him that he was basically just winging it as a pass rusher. Like he did no development whatsoever as a pass rusher. And that just made me even more smitten with the guy because, what he does.
No, I'm glad that you picked him, even though he's obviously not one that will be there at 14. I think I even said independent of availability.
Yeah.
So a lot of things there to enjoy. Number one, appreciate what they did with him and Sonny Styles. I will say it bluntly. I'm not the biggest Matt Patricia fan. I'm not. The Patriots Ravens stuff. Okay. Not even discussing, his job in Detroit. I don't have any judgment about that at all, but have to give Patricia and his staff credit in that they opened up an umbrella. They opened up a wider net, of possibilities for Styles and Reese. Hey, you'll play some inside linebacker. You'll play some edge defender. Normally, Reese was to the right and Styles was to the left, but there was times it was field and boundary. And I feel like Patricia, by design in practice, Reese couldn't get every edge defender drill. He couldn't do so because he was involved in so much, extremely violent with his hands. Very powerful against tight ends, obviously. I think when we talk about range, there's range of, covering the field, getting involved with tackles that are 12, 18 yards over there. And then there's range of your arm length, your wingspan. He's got both.
Yeah.
He's got the burst as well. I appreciate your answer for him being the first guy because even though he's not a possibility for Baltimore at all, it's what you saw on film. And so for me, I commend you for that being your first answer and not someone who might be there at 14 because it's specifically what I asked for was independent of availability.
Yeah, my you notice they give a draft pick, Ravens draft pick comp for everyone, and I love this one, which is Adalius Thomas, and it's not perfect, but it's the type of that version of Adalius Thomas where it was, he was doing everything, where he was playing the run, he was playing in space as a pass rusher. Like I think you could carve a role for him that would be really special. So I'm a big
Super
Reese guy.
talented.
Yeah.
Super talented. What they did at Ohio State with him, credit him and Styles, credit to them, their staff for, and that's going to help Ohio State in recruiting as well. Not just where all these guys get drafted, but hey, look, you're an inside linebacker, but we will accentuate your edge defender skills and help you, make more money. I know everybody talks about that, but will also help you just be a better football player and more of a weapon on the field. And so kudos to Patricia and their staff for doing that. And I'm not an Ohio State guy at all. All right, you got another one?
Yeah. So the guy I definitely want to talk about in a bit more depth is who I love. And I've seen a lot of people, especially Ravens fans, low on him as a potential selection for them, is Keldrick Falk, who you will find a couple of pages up from Arvell Reese, because I have him as my D-line number one and not an edge player. So I was watching Keldrick Falk around the time that I started watching around the time that Minter got appointed, and I started watching more Chargers film. And Keldrick Falk, so let's talk about his evaluation right first, which is that, he's, first of all, this athletic freak, and his size at over 34 inches, the length is 6'6", the
Young,
explosive
21.
ability, 20 years old still
20.
at the moment. Like, just like there's the first stuff. But then when you're thinking about what he does, like I think his upfield burst, like how he gets off the ball, is good. It's better in his it's better when I felt a lot of his game was basically predicated on where he was aligned, and when he was aligned inside the tackles, I felt this was a different story. And I think when he's in a 3-4 point stance inside the tackles, his burst was better off the ball actually than when he was standing up and had more runway. That was true, I think, in terms of the way he rushed the passer, where I felt like what he is as a pass rusher played better inside than it did outside. He just was better in closer quarters with people, like using his hands.
He's disciplined.
Violent.
He's also
disciplined. Very disciplined.
He reminds me. He reminds me, and I love I love the fact that you have a Ravens draft pick comp, by the way. But my comp for him in some ways was Trayvon Walker in a couple of regards, because Trayvon Walker at Georgia played so much 4-eye, and Trayvon Walker's reads where sometimes you watch a play and you're like, okay, what's this guy reacting to? Because it's drastically different from 2 plays ago or the next snap. With Keldrick Falk and Trayvon Walker, which is why I used this comparison, you could easily see what they're reading and what their reaction is based on. And they were consistent. And in some ways, things change at the NFL level as far as defensive end reactions. Sometimes they're selfish, and people will not like hearing that. There are guys who are selfish. And I've heard that from the mouth of 2 separate guys who played in the NFL at the defensive line position, basically saying that guy that played next to me was going to run upfield and chase sacks. So there is a real dynamic there, but Keldrick Falk, Trayvon Walker, they're disciplined. They read what they're supposed to. Where do you like him? I have my own kind of thought. Where do you like him for the Ravens? Like, it sounds like inside, but do you have a field boundary type of perspective with this? Because I do.
Well, so what I would mention that was when I was watching Minter's defense, right? And the reason I mentioned that was because I started watching him thinking there is a role here for him that is like significant snap count in Minter's defense. So like the tight front that he played against 12 and 13 personnel always had 4-eye, right? So like I think that's where he plays on, like there are going to be times that are not going to be in base on early downs, and you could argue that he could still be on the field in those situations playing outside. I wouldn't like it as much, but he could be. When you're playing a tight front, I would absolutely have him as one of the 3 down defensive linemen as the 4-eye. And there were plenty of times when, specifically in simulated, when they ran simulated pressures, there was almost always a 4-eye on the field. And so I could see Falk and Matabike as the 2 down defensive linemen in those obvious passing situations where they're running some simulated pressure. Like, to me, there's even if you're not talking about moving his alignment around, which I think you absolutely could move him around, I think there's a home for him actually in the Ravens defense
Yeah.
under Minter. So I really like his fit with the Ravens. Like, not only did I feel like he played like a Raven in the way that he defends the run and the violence that he plays with and the discipline that he plays with, I also felt like I could see a role for him. Like, yeah, I think they'll be high on him coming into this draft.
Reminds me in some ways, and this is a poor comparison. I almost don't want to say it because people will take offense to it. I do not think that ability-wise, long-term, that these two players will end up being the same caliber. But he reminds me in a lot of ways of Brent Urban from the standpoint of playing to the boundary in a 4-eye or a 3. But, excuse me, when the OLB, edge defender, whatever, to the boundary walks back to create like a third inside linebacker, Falk or Brent Urban would kick to the outside. And sometimes it's formation, sometimes it's personnel, sometimes there's different reasons for it. So Falk does definitely offer some of that type of versatility. Very long, obviously, and powerful. And he, in some ways, he reminds me of some of the offensive linemen in this draft that 1 year from now, other players who were drafted in their range might be superior to them production wise, but 3-4 years from now, maybe even 5, he may catch up to them in essence, be a late bloomer, compared to some of the other guys that are a little bit older. So he's not one of the guys that I picked, but it's a great answer. Do you have a third one or maybe an offense one?
Let's go offense, and I'll stay in the first round. Although I'll be keen to talk about Pons if you talk about Pons, because he would have been on my list as well. But if we stay in the first round, I think, and possibly not at 14, right? But we did say not that. I'm much higher on Omar Cooper Jr. than I would say the early consensus was. He is now starting to rise up some boards, and I can see that there's guys a bit higher on him. There were things with him that I thought were, so what was really interesting was he played majority outside in 2024, and then 2025 he played much more versatile role, much more in the slot than he played outside, and it was a total different picture in terms of production. That alone, just looking at that on its own, would tell you this kid's a slot receiver. I don't think he is. I think what happened in this past year is that his game went to a completely other level from what I saw in 2024 versus in 2025. The first thing I think was his release. Like, his release package just changed completely to the point where I could see him taking X snaps at time. Like, the way he gets off the line, like, it was just he puts it together in a really good plan, and his footwork is great, but he's got the physicality to him to be able to release from a jam as well. That was just something I didn't expect to see from his game. I like the way he separates, because I think he uses a nice combination of the three things I'm always looking for, which is, are you separating with athletic ability, with technique, or with play strength? And I think he can do all three on different types of routes. I think there's some issues with some technique on some specific routes, some specific breaks that I would talk about. But majority of the time for me, he's, against more physical DBs, you can see him compete with play strength at the top of a route, but you can also see him separate with that athletic ability that he has. And so I love that about him.
It seemed to me, Indiana, first of all, they saw a lot of man. Dan Orlovsky has caught a lot of flack recently for his Simpson versus Mendoza takes. And that's not what I'm here to talk about. But there was one element to something Dan Orlovsky said that I think is totally accurate. He said, why is everyone playing so much man against them? I mean, and he's got a point, because, there came a time, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6. I'm watching it. I'm like, here comes another slot fade. And here comes another slot fade. Or here comes another back shoulder throw, whether it was to Surratt or Cooper. And Orlovsky's got a point. I mean, he's got a point with that part of it. So for me, part of looking at Surratt and Cooper at times is like, I did feel like Indiana, for whatever reason, oftentimes was facing a reduced coverage umbrella. I don't know why. I have no idea why, but I just didn't feel like teams played an extremely diverse net of coverages against them. So as far as Cooper and Surratt, them being in the slot, I felt like was what Indiana was putting them there specifically to attack the coverages they were expecting, and it worked. And so I don't look at it as a limiting factor either. I think that's what you were saying. I like both him and Surratt more than other people do. Indiana's an extremely unique situation, the way they've been coached. And I wonder about those three players, how they project forward. There's a part of me that wonders if they've been coached at an extremely high level and they might be more prepared from day one than other guys from other programs. And I don't know if that's any if you have any reaction to that or anything you thought about that, because Cignetti is right now as good as it gets.
Yeah. I definitely played into my thinking. It certainly played into my process with him and Surratt to an extent, but definitely with Cooper Jr., where I just, it was one of those guys where I just couldn't stop watching film because I just wanted to get everything. I wanted to see everything. I wanted to get everything, and it took a lot of film to get to that point. But I felt pretty confident in seeing enough to project him to a high level. And I think there is just that slight thought in the back of your mind that there is like the coaching element to that I think would potentially bring his potential grade down slightly if we were playing that in. But I think the problem is, right, this is the first year we are seeing high level prospects out of that program. It's hard to ding them too hard for something where it just might not just be a thing at all. It might just be that, it's
his whole story, that whole situation is so everybody talks about the portal. It was mostly JMU kids. It was mostly James Madison kids. And I happen to have some knowledge of it. My nephew was recruited by James Madison. In fact, Cignetti was on staff that was his first offer, was James Madison. He didn't take it. He went to Vanderbilt. But point being, a lot of those guys, and we're going to do another one here in a moment, who can follow him because you like him as much as I do. A lot of those guys followed Cignetti. So I'm really interested in the Indiana guys, Mendoza, Surratt, Cooper, Hemby as well, who's a Maryland kid, from the University of Maryland, late round running back. All right, so let's do D'Angelo Pons. And where would I find him here? How far down approximately?
Oh, he's way, way, way down. You might want to scroll all the way down right to the bottom because he's in the shorter reports and the corners are at the end, just before the safeties. So a long way down for Pons.
Got it. My apologies. All right, what do you like about him besides the obvious?
I mean, the thing is, right, like I did not expect plugging the film on it. I obviously knew what I was looking at because you watch enough Indiana, he stands out so much when you just watching games, right? But I did not expect to be as high on him as I thought I would. Like I've projected him as a starting nickel corner. I genuinely think the kid can play outside. Like the length is just not as important at the moment. I don't think in today's NFL, it just doesn't come into it as much. And the one thing you want to look for in terms of the length, like I remember, I know he's a bit shorter than McDuffie, but I remember when McDuffie came out and the length was a big conversation, and I was like, yeah, okay, he's not as long as you'd like, but have you watched him? If you watched his ball skills, like it just doesn't matter. And I think it's the same with Pons for me. It's like it just the place where you really would concern yourself about that lack of length is at the catch point, and I do not have that concern for D'Angelo Pons.
Same place I am, and I just I love. You said something about Omar Cooper, and I wrote it down, and I knew immediately I was going to ask you about Pons. Because the same sentence or the same phrase applies. I couldn't stop watching the film. I couldn't stop watching, even against Ohio State when he had, Jeremiah Smith got off some and made some plays, obviously. But he's as good as it gets, as far as what's out there in college football. I love the combativeness. He really reminds me of Amik Robertson. Now, Amik Robertson did not play well this past year for Detroit. In my opinion, he still garnered another contract from another team. I like the Amik Robertson comparison. I see a little bit of Devin Witherspoon here too,
Yeah.
from the standpoint of it doesn't matter to me what is asked. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it decisively. I'm committed. Um, I'm interested to see how Pons works out in the NFL. Personally, my belief, if I was saying who do I trust D'Angelo Pons just from watching the film.
Yeah. And the things, right, that you want to sort of the boxes that you want to check if you've got a shorter guy like this, a smaller guy, like how is he at the line when he's jamming? Super competitive and tough, and also technically proficient when he's jamming at the line. Like his hand placement, timing is superb. Is like what kind of run defender is he? I mean, he's shot out a cannon as a run defender. Like these things where you're like, what is like these things where you need to check the box of a smaller corner. He's just checking
They're all checked
boxes.
off.
Yeah, and you can tell. You can tell I like the kid by the fact that you can barely fit the second guy on the page here, and that I've just got strength after strength after strength after strength because I also couldn't stop watching the film because I just kept finding new things that I liked about it.
I really liked his, all of those things you mentioned, first of all. But one of the other things I enjoyed was in off coverage, whether it was zone or match or whatever, people want to call it, or whether he was reading, he was able to stay connected to the receiver he should be connected to, but also kind of, I don't like to say defend two routes at the same time. Sometimes you get opportunities to do that, like two verticals, you divide the verticals and you react because you're athletic. But what I'm talking about is not two verticals. I mean, two concepts that are designed to put you in conflict, like a high-low, maybe smash. And Pons is a guy who could be where he should be for the route he's responsible for defending, but also kind of like halfway defending the other, almost like he's defending 1.5 routes at the same time in off coverage. And I think he's super intelligent and super prepared for every moment. And so again, related to the coaching for, Mendoza, Surratt, and Omar Cooper and others, Pons, I think, is ready from day one. If I said it earlier wrong, what I was trying to get across was I wonder if Pons isn't more ready on day one because of the coaching that he's received and how intelligent he's played. That's a great answer. It's so interesting that you picked Falk, who's on one end of the spectrum, and Pons, who's on another, as far as the size, the production, size, and wingspan, component. I know he did run like a 4.28 or something. So it's all of those great answers.
And the thing I was always taught to do was like, what can this kid do, and not what can't he do, and what is the projection? Like your job is to project these guys. Like what does this guy look like at the next level? And yeah, I think that's why I'm gravitated towards different types of players, because I'm constantly looking for what can they do, and then how do I see them at the next level? What is their role going to be?
That sounds like a coach, to be honest with you. All right, so let's get a little specific here. You said something on Twitter maybe 2.5 weeks ago, and I really gravitated towards it. I really identified with it, I should say, and agree with it. If I remember this incorrectly, please stop me. It was something about pick 14 and being really pleased, content, comfortable, whatever word you want to say, with the options or opportunities that are there. And I totally agree. I think that I have heard people say things like, what if the board is dry at 14? And I just don't see that happening. I'm in a totally different place. So what do you like about pick 14 as far as not just the players, but the opportunities that'll be there to take someone that's at a high level, or obviously, trade back?
Yeah, I think there's just, to me, it feels like there is going to be and actually the page you might want to roll up to on this one is right at the top, in sort of the first few pages. I've got a horizontal board there that it's just passed through it, but it's pretty small actually on the screen. It's fine, it's a bit small. But I think it's an interesting situation that they're in, to the point where there are potential falling talents all over the place because of the imperfections of the prospects in this class. Like Ruben Bain could fall, I would run the card up. Like Sonny Styles is an off-ball linebacker, again, I would run the card up because he's not going to play off-ball linebacker. Well, he is for the Ravens, but they're going to create a role for him on the opposite side of the defense to Cal Hamilton that then you pose a real problem for offensive coordinators in that situation. I love both the top corners, and if they fell, I think they upgrade the Ravens cornerback room. I think both of them immediately become cornerback one for the Ravens. So I would run the card up for those guys. And you could make an argument that would get the pitchforks out in the mob on Twitter that Downs and Thieneman could also be interesting additions to the Ravens long term. I don't know how they'd make it work with Hawkins and Starks and Hamilton in next year, but both of them extremely talented guys. And if all of that fails, you've got an option where I think a trade up for Carnell Tate is not out of the realms of possibility for the Ravens in terms of what they're looking for the receiver position. If he fell a little bit, I don't think he's going to get all the way to 14, but there's an option too. And then if all else fails, the two offensive linemen are your fallback positions, and Venga Ioane is not a bad fallback position for me at all.
Agreed.
Like he's squarely in my top 10. Like I like that's good value at 14. And I like that as a fallback position. I think Maui Goa has a slightly higher ceiling for me. And I think that higher ceiling is probably better accessed at guard, where I think he could be an all-pro. But you helpfully maybe have a tackle on your hands there if that works out. So there's an option that you would potentially see Maui Goa, even though on my board here he's below Ioane, that they might take Maui Goa above Ioane for those reasons. So I really like the options on the board.
Sorry. When you say, and again, everything you just said just confirms to me that when I saw that, do you know the Twitter post I'm referring to? It was like 2 weeks ago, somewhere in that range.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. I should have screenshotted it. My apologies. But I immediately, started using that to say to other people like, hey, look, I am totally on board with this. And so you just went through quickly off the top of your head, what's there as far as, Maioga, or however you say his name. I really like him, the right tackle for Miami, and I love the whether people consider it a fallback or whether people consider it priority 1, priority 2. Having someone who could play guard now, but also be a tackle if one of our tackles goes down. I think that is an interesting way to approach the 2026 season. Not that Carnell Tate or, Ruben Bain, Sonny Styles is there, like you said, easy decision. But to look at the 26 season, which under a first-year head coach is still a win-now approach, I think, to have the tackle position, the floor of the tackle position, both raised and strengthened, not just a raising of the floor, but a strengthening of it. Look at the Chargers. E.A. Edgar Allen made this point couple of nights ago. Look at what happened to the Chargers. They just lost both of their tackles and season's pretty much over. I really gravitate towards him specifically. And I understand why people have talked about, Fano and other guys too, because they have that versatility. But I am totally on board or in line with what you're saying, that the options at 14 are plentiful. And that leads me to a follow-up question. I don't know if I put this one on there, so forgive me for that. Do you expect the phone to ring? Well, the phone will ring. Do you expect the phone to ring multiple times in between 13 and 14? Or I personally think the phone's going to start ringing after pick 12, meaning there's multiple guys on the board, 13, and teams are going to try to, okay, let me get the Ravens to agree now if I want to trade up. Do you think the phone is going to ring? And then how many times? Because I think it's going to be 5 or 6.
I think it's going to ring. I think that the challenge is going to be how far they move back. And I think there is so as much as this draft, like I think it's not a full tier break, but I think there is a small tier break about 4 or 5 picks after the Ravens, where I would say actually I don't want to be in the early 20s because I think it becomes a little bit no man's land. I think if you were back in the like late 20s, early 30s, then you're starting to get back into the sweet spot of this draft. But I think there's like a small window where there's a bit of a lull in this draft. And so I wouldn't want to go back too far. And I think that's going to be the issue that they may find is that they're going to be sat looking at a board, and right when they trade back, their normal trade back mantra is we've got 4 or 5 guys here that we've clustered together, so we're happy to get one of them later on. I think they're going to be looking at 3 or 4 guys and then a small cliff, and so they're going to say we don't want to risk going back too far, and so then it becomes about who is calling and what is the value they're offering, and I wonder whether that is going to match up.
So in reverse order, Jets at 18. I'm sorry, Jets are at 16. Vikings are at 18. And then you have Lions at 17. And keep in mind, the Lions don't have a third. So if the Lions have a tackle that they want and they certainly need a tackle, regardless of what Brad Holmes said. I could see the Lions calling the Ravens to move up because the Jets are at 16. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there, to be honest with you. The Jets are one that I think is interesting because they're at 2, 16, 33, and I think 44. I think they're right before us at 45. I may be wrong there. So there's just in that little cluster, like you said, that 3 or 4 picks afterwards, there's a lot of options and a lot of reasons why you could foresee, teams calling to move up for a specific guy.
Yeah, and the Vikings, right, because I would imagine maybe not with the way I have them evaluated, but Downs and Thieneman potentially being the 2 of the best candidates to slide as well that they might end up thinking about moving up for. I think there's definitely going to be opportunities. It's just whether it's going to align. I think the other conversation I wanted in this point, I think, because I don't think we're going to get to the other questions have with you really quickly, is the Kenyon Sadiq conversation, because I've gone back and forth so many times with Sadiq. I really like the player. I think there's some technical things that I want to see him work on at the top of his routes. Like there are times you can see him blow past highly athletic.
How far down is he?
Like a good sort of 10 pages probably at this point, I would say. Yeah. Just below Boston, probably.
Got it. Okay, I'm going to just keep it blown up like that a little bit. So my apologies for the presentation, but go ahead.
No, you're fine. So yeah, I think like a guy who you can see him blow past highly athletic, highly recruited corners by like 5-6 yards on a seam route, and then you can see a not really athletic linebacker plaster him in coverage, and he never gets open. So there's some inconsistency there, which I think is due to the sort of attention to detail at the top of some of his routes that he needs to fix. But it's a small issue that I think can get fixed. He's obviously a demon blocker in space. There's no issue with him in his run blocking in space. He really excels in that world. Where I see him struggle is at the line of scrimmage in the box, when he's having to, if he's working a combo block with his tackle, the tackle releases to the second level and leaves Sadiq on the end. The end will just dispose of Sadiq extremely quickly and get into the backfield and make a play. So he's at the moment, to me, he's not a good in the box run blocker. And so then you start to get into a question about what is Declan Doyle going to run? Is he going to be an innovator, or are we importing a Ben Johnson offense? If we're importing a Ben Johnson offense, I'm not sure about the wisdom of, and it would need to be in as part of a bigger picture, right? But at the moment, if we're talking about just looking at the picture at the end of round 1, if Sadiq is the pick at 14, your tight end room is Mark Andrews, who does not play in line, has not played in line for a large proportion of his career, if not all of it. Sadiq, who could play in line, but you don't particularly want him blocking the box. You want to get him in motion, get him out into space in the way the Bears did with Loveland this past year. And Durham Smythe, who is going to fulfill the role, presumably, that he fulfilled in Chicago this past year.
Of course.
So you're missing Cole Kmet. Like you don't have Cole Kmet in this scenario. And I think when I look at the Bears offense, Kmet was crucial in establishing the run in 12 and 13 personnel. And that seemed to me to be a crucial like cog in how that scheme was put together. And so you start to wonder, like, where do they get that guy? And is it a bit schematically awkward to have to try and build a role for both Sadiq and Mark Andrews
Right.
when they don't quite fit what you're looking for? But everything about me goes against it, because I can see the role that I can see the Sadiq ceiling. I can see the role that he could play. It's just, are
As a
they able to
prospect.
do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think someone in the Ravens Discord, which I will have like I think 3 questions from people in the Ravens Discord if you have time, that is.
Yeah.
But someone in the Ravens Discord said it very well. Said for Sadiq at 14, and then we've still got to address offensive line at 40. Begin to address offensive line at 45. I'm not as big of a fan. However, and I'm paraphrasing here, probably not doing a good job. If we in a trade back could get Sadiq at 22, 21, 24, whatever. Steelers are at 21, so I think 21, so we're not trading back with them. But Sadiq at 24, and I've also picked up pick 58. Now I've got 45, 58, and 80. Then I feel great. I would leave day one feeling fantastic for what we have on day two, and I would be in a position to really enjoy the prospect, the talent, potential of Sadiq. Does that fit with where you are? Again, I'm just paraphrasing what someone posted.
No, I think that makes sense. I think my concern, I suppose, is that they have a particular need at tight end, which I think is an all-around tight end, and those guys are unicorns now. But like, there's a need there. Drafting Kenyon Sadiq does not fill that need, I don't think. I think it's a potential high ceiling play, like a high ceiling play that you make with drafting Sadiq. But the Ravens have some needs, and they have some areas where they need to improve their performance, and I don't think Sadiq does either of those things for them. And so then you're sort of saying, well, we've used 14 and we still got to move on something else. So I would be in the same situation where I'd be more comfortable on him on a trade back, I think. But it's just something I've really struggled with, because I can see how he would work in a Declan Doyle offense. Like you can literally look at it and see how it would work, but it just feels like it doesn't quite work because of where they are at the moment in that room.
It all, I also try to remind myself that, like, guys like Sadiq could go to, if they end up in the right situation in year one, you could be looking at him after 4 or 5 games and he's got 5 touchdowns. You could absolutely see that from the potential for what they have. Additional thought to that, and then I'll move to the questions from people in the Discord, is I think to some degree, I am mentally scarred from watching the offensive line situation, and I'm going to say the last 2 years. And I know that there's people out there who do not agree because of how historic the production was in 2024. We had dramatic, obvious offensive line issues week 1 of 2024, and they still existed in the AFC divisional round loss to the Buffalo Bills. And they came into play in the first half. You can look at the run production in the first half of that game from running backs. And if you can segregate or separate out the run production for Lamar Jackson in the first half of that game, it's totally different. My point is, I wonder if to some degree, some of us, myself included, aren't reacting, maybe overreacting to the O-line deficiencies and screaming, we've got to address offensive line at 14. We've got to address offensive line at 14. And the Ravens front office hopefully has a more balanced, professional approach. I'm open to that interpretation, even though the reality is our offensive line was shit the past 2 years. And that's part of the reason why, you even put it in your guide. And I think you were understated with it. Steve Bisciotti was direct. Steve Bisciotti was saying something without necessarily saying it. And Eric DaCosta is going to have to be heavy on draft O-line in this draft, I think, to strengthen the depth and the talent level that we've got. So as far as Sadiq goes at 14, if he sees the pick at 14, maybe people like myself will be, quote, disappointed. but maybe it'd be the right move long term. I'm open to that interpretation.
Yeah, and my final thought, Coach, which is that like there is this X factor with this draft, right? Which is that this is a new coaching staff. This 14 is a tone setting pick. Who like Maui Noah and Ioane would be the tone setting pick, right? It would be we are committed to solving that problem, and we're committed to solving it with extreme physicality, and that would be that's why I kind of gravitate towards those two at the moment as the more likely selection, because I feel like this is like a set the tone pick for the Ravens, I think.
I mean, it didn't work out from a team standpoint for the Dallas Cowboys, but Tyler Booker was a great pick last year, I think at 12 or 14. I think it was 12. And then Gray Zabel obviously was a huge factor for the Seattle Seahawks. So, no, great discussion about 14 and just, in general, the options. So these are heretofore, these are going to be questions from the Ravens Discord. Again, 3 of them if you have time.
Yeah, no problem.
I know I told you an hour. So this one is from Goat Hunter is the name of the guy's account in our Discord, former college football player. I respect him, and I often agree with his reactions in our Discord, but I really like this question. So it's a little bit related to what we just talked about. What's your opinion on need versus value? You kind of addressed it, in the last 10 minutes. But 2-part now, is the value for offensive line higher now due to the need to protect Lamar? And I think that's a very serious minded question, at least, basically need versus value in a typical draft where we've gone, let's say last year we went 12-5 and we lost in the AFC divisional round, but this is different. New coaching staff. We were 8-9 last year. Fired John Harbaugh. So how do you see need versus value given where the Ravens are right now?
So I think the way I see it, and I try to set it out each year in the personnel plan I put at the top of the guide, and talk about some specific categories of how I would build a team and what I would do to plan to build a team. And for me, there are the Ravens have very few genuine needs. That their genuine need, I think, right now is tight end 2, that all around tight end, and a center. Like that is where the glaring holes are on the roster. And I don't think you address that need in round 1. And so the next set of needs that you address is performance related. It is how can you raise the floor of this team with better performance at certain positions. And to me, the performance element of it is the interior offensive line. They could roll out tomorrow and start with an interior offensive line with guards. Sorry, not interior offensive line. They need a center, but they could roll out tomorrow with John Simpson and Emory Jones or Andrew Voorhees. I just don't like that. Like I want to get an upgrade on that level of performance. Although Ledford seems excited about Simpson, and so I'm willing to kind of to sort of give them some slack on that. But I think that's where I want to go. And so ordinarily I would very much err on the side of value. And I think it's the same in this draft. But I think from an offensive line perspective, like I'm a real believer in Lamar Jackson as a pocket passer. Like I have a deep appreciation for his play as a quarterback. And there were times when he's had really good interior protection. There are times it is this picture perfect painting in the pocket as a quarterback. And I am desperate to see that again. And it's just not the same when he doesn't have the confidence in the interior protection. And he's still a phenomenal quarterback, even when that happens. But for people who can appreciate the small details on the football field, getting some really good protection on the interior for Lamar Jackson, allowing him to be able to step into his throws, I think it's paramount that the Ravens get back to that and find somebody. And I feel really good about Ioane from that perspective in terms of stepping in immediately and just being a wall in pass protection that is almost impenetrable.
I think you've touched on, Goat Hunter had that as part of his question, so you circled back to that. But I think you've touched on what is, one of the main elements, if not the main element, which is if Lamar Jackson has time and space, he becomes virtually indefensible. And so I agree that hopefully we're at a situation where a coaching staff and a front office recognizes that, regardless of how people want to characterize or describe it. The last 2 years, we did not do that. We did not do that in a way, whether it was play calls and design of play calls, whether it was play call timing, whether it was, and you even mentioned it, I think, earlier in this answer and something else, Simpson and Emory Jones and maybe Voorhees, quote, could be enough, but they are not, and so to create real competition, to earn the right to protect Lamar Jackson, to me, should be one of the ways it's described to the interior offensive line, as opposed to here, this is your job privately, whereas publicly they knew who was going to get the job the last 2 years anyway. So I love your answer. I thought it was a great question from Goat Hunter, and I thought it really got to the crux of what this draft in 26 should be about, which is Mentor and Anthony Weaver are going to figure out a way to stop or slow people down, which we haven't done the last 2 years. And we need to give Lamar Jackson time and space to create and utilize playmakers. I get it, though. People want playmakers at 14, and so there's no wrong answer if it works out the right way. I've got another one, and this one's not player specific, but this is from a user, Not a Chance You Read This. That's his username. And his question is, how do you determine a Ravens fit for a player? Is it need-based, play style / scheme-based, or is it connected to historically what it means to be a Raven? So if whatever type of answer you want to provide there, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it's mostly play style and scheme. There is no need base in it. I don't play that into the evaluation. There is maybe a little bit of historic thing in there, but that maybe more comes into it because of the play style and the archetype of player that the Ravens targeted in the past is the kind of thing I codify. Within the reports, I give a rating on explosive athleticism, which I think is something that they have moved towards more in recent years, and it does feel like that is something that they care about quite significantly, more so than I think if I was doing this 8 years ago, that wouldn't have been one of the factors, but I think it is now. Football intelligence, that they are high on smart football players. You can see it from the conversation that they exposed us to in the war room last year for the first overall pick, where they got the two scouts to come and talk about Malachi Starks like that. They place a premium on processing ability. They, at almost every position, I think they value versatility hugely. It's very true on defense. They've always valued versatility on defense, but I also think it's true on offense too. And some of the players they talk about and that they pay are guys who are versatile. Grit is something they've specifically mentioned in the past as something they look for. I think it's a substitute for toughness, but I think it's a specific thing that they look for. And then I play scheme into the evaluation as well. And that generally is like a scheme fit. But the one thing I'd say about scheme fit that I think less of a, it's less, I place less importance on scheme fit than I did in the past. And the reason I do that is because I was just huge on the Tyler Linderbaum is a great prospect, but you're not going to see the Ravens pick him with the Greg Roman offense at the time.
Right.
And they did. So I don't think scheme fit. I think we as as analysts that aren't in an NFL war room, I think we can get a little bit carried away sometimes with saying this guy fits this and doesn't fit this,
Yeah.
and being absolute about it. Where in reality, I think in NFL war rooms they will say like, okay, you maybe can't do this as well, but there are coaches in the room as well who talk about like, okay, yeah, but I can see him do this, this, and this, and I think I can coach that up. And so I don't think scheme fit is as important in real NFL war rooms, I think.
Yeah, agreed. And I think I think what's often not mentioned along with that is terminology. So, for example, the year that Todd Monken goes from Georgia to the Ravens, if we had a offensive player for Georgia who had been drafted by the Ravens, of course he knows the terminology, he knows the splits, he knows the checks, and so there. I think oftentimes scheme is used to talk about the plays that are run, and in my observation, with my limited experience as a coach or at a lower level, I would say that scheme should be like 75%, and the other 25%, maybe even 30, should be terminology. How quickly can the player latch on to what this word or this phrase means and then apply it in an NFL game? Because that's a real dynamic, and that's something I worried about with, to be honest with you, with this offense coming in, was how quickly were we going to be able to gravitate or grab onto some of that terminology.
I completely agree. I completely agree, Coach. I think it's a thing that just there's a really interesting discussion I think to be had at some point, and I think this draft will be a really interesting indicator of like a culture of what the culture of the Ravens is going to be moving forward. Like there will be certain picks that are made where we'll point to it and say, okay, that is what they value now. It seems to me like they're going to value physicality again quite highly. Like I think they made a sort of deliberate move away from that to an extent to work on some of those to bring in more of those explosive speed type element certainly into their offense anyway, but also into their defense. And so I wonder whether there'll be a move back towards physicality with the way they're talking at the moment. But I think this draft will be instructive for us on that front.
I guess one, maybe two more questions, but before that, kind of related to something we talked about in the beginning, the fact that you produce a Ravens centric guide, and this applies to Jason from Huddle It Up Films as well. I think it adds another layer to the analysis. And what I mean is what myself and others did this past year on the draft website. I felt like it was a difficult endeavor, but I felt like, to use a video game analogy, it was almost like easy mode because we're just evaluating the player, the potential, and you guys are doing the same thing, but you're doing it specific to the Ravens. And so, you got the film, you got measurables, injury history, all of the combine, pro days, etc. But the whole Raven-centric part, to me, increases the level of difficulty looking at it from where I am as someone who does, I do Ravens content, I do some Lions content, I do some Seahawks content. And so for me, I have even more respect for what you guys have done with your draft guides and big boards and stuff like that, because it's whittling it down to what the Ravens might want at this specific time, or might need in this draft, for 2026 and moving forward. So, I applaud what you have done and what Jason has done as well, because it's Raven centric. And I feel like, I don't know if I could do that. I feel like my eyes now see things from a different angles intentionally, because to be quite honest with you, I kind of didn't think 2025 was going to go well when we had offensive line commitment to these guys. And so I'm not going to say that I thought we'd be 8-9, but I decided before the season, I was like, I'm going to do some Seahawks film this year. And it really did force me to look at things from a different angle. You guys doing this specifically for the Ravens, I think is far more challenging than what I have done and other guys on the website. So kudos to you guys for that.
I appreciate that.
All right. So from one other person in the Ravens Discord, how did you for this draft, or how do you normally evaluate or incorporate injured players?
So it's a really good question, interesting one, because I think what I do is I don't incorporate it. I would say, like, I don't look at it. When I start to talk about the draft and what I think the Ravens would do, I'm starting to think about some of those things. I think when I'm evaluating, because I just don't have the information, because I don't have the medical checks. I'm not a doctor. I don't have doctors at my disposal. I don't think it's wise to speculate or to play it into the evaluation. So I purely watch the film. Um, it does play into the evaluation on the film when I have a report. So you can see on all of my long reports, I've got all the injury stuff. Even if I like, you can get that wherever you want. You can just chat GPT it now if you want and find out what injury history is for a player. But I put it in there because I do it. And the reason I do it is because I want the context on that player from that year. I want to understand if they've been facing an injury, and then I want to play that into the evaluation. If it's a widely reported injury that has limited them, then I think it's important context. And I'm going to play that into what I'm thinking. And I'm going to try and watch more film on them from when they weren't reported to be carrying an injury. So I think that's the way I play it into my evaluation. In terms of like value and whether I'm going to select a player, whether I think I should select a player, when I start talking about it now, I will start to think about, I think as a GM, try to think as a GM and think about risk factors. And so, but again, you still don't have all the information. So
Right.
there are things that Akeem Mesidor is a great example. I think Akeem Mesidor, I'm really high on Mesidor. I think he's a phenomenal pass rusher. I think he's got one of the best put together rush plans I've ever seen in a college prospect. And I don't think it's just because he's 25. Like I think some of it might be the fact that Jason Taylor's his position coach, but there's a lot to play into the evaluation. But I think he's great. The thing I would say is if just on my evaluation alone, he would be a pick at 14, and you would like from his talent perspective, it would definitely be a factor. The problem is that the plantar plates surgery on both feet is a significant concern that I think you would have to have some risk, like as a GM, you have to play in some risk factor into his evaluation and his positioning on the board. A similar conversation with Jordan Tyson as well, like at the top of the draft. Right. So like, I think that's how I play it in when I talk about it. But in terms of my evaluation, I stick to the fidelity of my process, and I will take into account injury in terms of what film I'm watching, but I won't necessarily take it into account in the way I value a player.
I think it's a great answer. I think what some people, and I don't think this is necessarily what Ty Jamar in my Discord, I don't think it's necessarily what Ty was looking for, which would be, I take that guy off my board. What you said what you just dropped, I think is a great answer. I will probably clip that question and your answer as a separate little 5-minute video, because I think it's fantastic. You're showing respect to the player. Basically, what I think I heard was, this number isn't lowered because he had an injury in week 13 of 24 or week 13 of 25, or because he had 3 injuries over a 4-year period. That number is what it is because of your process. And then the awareness of the injuries, well, it's obvious, but that's for the Ravens front office to figure out. I think there's a tremendous level of respect in the way that you delivered that answer. And it reminds me a little bit of Jordan Tyson. Maybe a week ago on social media, Twitter generally, or X, someone talking about his toughness and that he wasn't a Rams receiver. And I thought it was really instructive and neat. I think it was an Arizona State area reporter who responded with, "Hey, did you see him twice go back in the game against a certain team?" And I went back and grabbed the all 22 of that game. And I was like, with the all 22, sometimes you get the scoreboard shot between plays. And you're like, okay, why is he, he's in the game with 8 minutes left in the third quarter. And then all of a sudden you don't see him until 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Like, did the other team have a 22-play possession? Why is there this large gap? And it's because the guy was getting treatment and he walked back on the field. And so, and I'm not trying to say, we should draft Jordan Tyson. I'm saying, I'm giving you credit. in a long roundabout way for your answer, because your evaluation is independent of the injuries, because you're grading them on what they are on the field when fully healthy. And sometimes you, me, anyone, we may be grading a player for what they are on the field, but they're actually playing at 88% or 90 because of something we don't know about. So that's a great answer, James. Um, about as good as it gets, if you ask me.
Thanks, Coach. And with Tyson, I think specifically, the question should be about injury, like injury plaguedness in general. And it's certainly, I mean, I saw some of that as well. I think the toughness element is ridiculous, given that the first injury was an ACL, PCL, MCL tear. He tore everything in his knee as a true freshman, and then as a redshirt sophomore, he broke his collarbone, and then as a redshirt junior, he had a hamstring injury. Now, like, he missed some. The only one there that you could possibly start to question his toughness. I hate questioning toughness over injuries, but the one, especially when you have no context, it's ridiculous if you're not in the program. But the only one that you could potentially question, right, is the hamstring injury. I've had a hamstring injury that if I was soft, I could have missed 10 games. Like, it's missing 3 on a serious hamstring injury is no mean feat.
And he stayed in the one game.
Exactly.
Or returned to it multiple times, I think twice.
So the toughness isn't a question. I think that the question for me in terms of a risk factor is the fact that the injuries have happened virtually every year. And that isn't a toughness. It's just some guys just get injured a lot. And I did myself. So I know the story. And so it's that is something you should consider, but I'm not sure it's going to, be a question of toughness at all.
I love your answer. Like I said earlier, I feel bad for keeping you for this long, but it's a lot of fun. But I do have one more, and this is something I did a video with EA, Edgar Allan, and Jake Howlett a couple of nights ago, maybe last night. I don't know. The nights are running together at this point. Give me 2 underrated players in this draft. No justification required. Okay, no explanation required. Just players you watched film of, and then you thought, okay, I like this guy more than others. And I mean, really, I mean like 3rd, 4th, 5th, maybe even 6th round guys. I'm going to give you 3 of mine. Jalen Husky, safety / corner from Maryland. Denai Dennis Sutton from Penn State. Traydon Stukes, I guess a 4th one. Jaden Kennedy, a nickel from Oregon. Do you have any guys like that you like more than others because you think they'll have a 6, 7, 8-year career, even though they're drafted 4th, 5th, 6th round?
Yeah, so the first one, so probably not a too much later round guy, but definitely a guy who I think is going to fall to an extent is Malachi Fields, who was a bit of a darling of the process early on, right? But he just, through the testing, I think is going to end up falling, and I just think he's a really skilled receiver. In fact, he drops his weight incredibly well for his size, like good hands. Like, I really like Fields as a receiver. I quite like him for the Ravens as well, actually. Also on the theme of athletic testers, like poor athletic testers that are going to fall, but were early risers in the process. I think LT Overton is a guy I love for the Ravens. Young, but raw as a pass rusher. I don't know that he's got a lot of juice and a lot of wiggle, but he's got an intriguing power game that you might be able to build a plan out of, and he's just a phenomenal run defender, which I think the Ravens should be out on the lookout for. And if you're looking for a much deeper cut, I've talked about like the importance of an all-around tight end. I think, and I have to give credit to Matt Waldman for this, because I wasn't on him until Matt Waldman had him quite high in his guide. Is Carson Ryan from BYU, who's a non-combine invitee, who just like I kept watching him and thinking, why was this guy not invited to the combine? Like, there are only a handful of tight ends in this class that I think are better than him in terms of an all-around projection. Like, and so he'll be a late round pick, I would think, but I can see something happening with him.
When do you stop? First of all, great answer. I don't know much about the tight end from BYU, but all the other guys, and I respect what you do enough that I'll probably be looking at BYU film in about an hour once this finishes uploading. When do you stop? When do you stop? How close to the draft do you stop looking at film, evaluating, and just doing more of the production on the draft guide? Like 2 days ago, 20 days ago. When?
Yeah, I think I stop. I stop very late. So I try to get through as many guys as I can, and so I do stop 2, 3 days before I end up starting to get into the production. This year, I managed to put the short reports in as I was writing them, which was really useful. But then I had to copy and paste all the long form reports over, and that can take some time. So it's a labor intensive couple of days to get it presentable. But I try and reserve as much time as possible to watch the film, and I'll probably I'll probably take a little bit of a break, and then I'll probably carry on right up till the draft, just because that's me. Or I'll start watching some 2027 guys or something, just because I can't stop myself. I'm an addict.
Well, it's me too. I identify totally. It's more than presentable. I can see the graphical attempts, or the graphical organization, I should say. So it's amazing work. I, I knew whenever I messaged you, whatever, I don't know, a month ago or something, I knew that I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about it and try to shed some light on what it is you do. Ravens fans know about it already, but there's a significant amount of Lions and Seahawks fans. So I knew that I wanted to try, with whatever small audience I have, to bring it to more people's attention. But now I'm really glad that I did, because, hearing some of your answers, the level of respect you have for the player, I think that's, along with being an addictive process for you, I think that's part of the reason why you work so hard. This is projection here, but I think it's also why the product you put out is so good, because you do have so much respect for the players, and you want that to be displayed in the final product. So, it's an amazing endeavor for you to put out. Do you get any? Let me ask you this. This is a weird question, but I get this. As someone who's done YouTube for 4 years, do you get friends or people who are like, "Why do you do this?" Because I do.
Absolutely. The strange thing is, the, obviously I live in the UK, and so NFL is already, like, American football is already a niche thing in the UK. To do the draft, there are actually a couple of other guys in the UK who are really good. There's a good follower on X called Jack Brentall that people should follow. He's a UK based guy. There's Ollie Hodgkinson, works for Pro Football Network. There's a few like guys in the UK who do this. Like, not, I don't necessarily produce a guide. Jack does produce a guide, but some of the others don't. So it's so niche in the UK. Like, there's not, the draft is not a thing in the UK, and so the only thing that that people understood was when I was lucky enough last year to announce the Teddy Buchanan pick on live on
Yeah.
the coverage, and that was the only thing that people understood, was like, oh, wow, you're going to be on TV in America. That's cool. So yeah, I definitely get that quite a lot.
Well,
Yeah.
just I asked the question because I get it. I mean, friends, family, people I coach with, taught with, like, why do you do that? What's in it for you? I'm like, well, I love doing it. Number one. Number two, I think people enjoy it. At least they tell me they do. So, and it's a lot of fun, and it feeds that addiction that I think we both share, as far as watching the film and trying to interpret it. So, I had a lot of fun. I kept you for a lot longer than we intended. So I know it's late at night for you. Really want to thank you for your time, and the work that you put out on the behalf of Ravens fans, and hopefully other fans that get exposed to it. Thank you for all the work that you put in.
No problem, Gretchen. Thanks for the time too. Like, the feeling is completely mutual in terms of the appreciation of your work too. So was just so happy that we could get on and talk. It's been great.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword having an addictive personality, because you end up with a lot of late nights. Well, in your case, it might be early mornings, over there. But in any case, man, thank you for your time. And I'll post this one up tonight, and give Ravens and hopefully Lions and Seahawks fans a chance to check out your draft guide. Appreciate your time, man.
Thanks, man.